All right, let's get into it. Today we're going to unpack a term that you might have heard, but that really gets to the heart of a huge modern political puzzle: Iraqocracy. It's a word that tries to capture the struggle of a country that, on paper, has all the pieces of a democracy, but the reality on the ground feels like something else entirely.
So, let's just start with this question. Think about it for a second. If a country holds elections, has a constitution, that's a democracy, right? You'd think so. But for a place like post-invasion Iraq, that simple math, it just doesn't work. And figuring out why is pretty much what this whole explainer is about.
So, let's get right to the main event. What exactly is this thing called Iraqocracy?
Okay, first thing you have to know, this is not some official term you're going to find in a Poli-Sci 101 textbook. Not at all. Think of it more like political shorthand, maybe even a nickname, that people started using to describe the very unique and very troubled system that emerged in Iraq after 2003. And wow, is it a loaded term. It's not neutral, it's a critique, right from the start, pointing to a system that's seen as dysfunctional, divided, and corrupt.
And this idea of a flawed system brings us straight to a concept that analysts talk about all the time: the democratic deficit. It's all about that gap, and sometimes it's a giant canyon between the process of democracy and the actual results it delivers for the people. And this right here shows you that gap perfectly. On the one side, you have all the things you'd expect to see. Yep, they hold regular elections, they have a formal constitution, it's a sovereign country. But then you look at the other side, the reality. There's almost no accountability for leaders, corruption is absolutely rampant, other countries are constantly interfering, and maybe worst of all, the government often fails to provide the most basic services. It's like having a car that looks great on the outside, but the engine just won't run.
And, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? A far cry from genuine democracy despite elections. You can just feel the sheer frustration in those words. That's the voice of people who have done their part, who've gone out to vote, only to realize it hasn't changed much of anything about their daily lives.
So how did things get this bad? To really get what the critics are saying, we kind of have to pop the hood on this thing and look at how this fractured system is actually built. Let's look at the core components. So the whole idea of Iraqocracy really stands on a few key pillars, and they're all connected. You can see them right here, everything from the sectarian politics and corruption to that democratic deficit we just talked about. Let's really dig into three of the biggest ones. First up, sectarian politics, and this is so crucial. We're not just talking about politicians who happen to come from different backgrounds. No, the system itself was set up to formally divide the most powerful jobs along these lines: Shia, Sunni, and Kurd. Now, maybe the original intention was to guarantee everyone was represented, but critics say it has literally built division into the DNA of the state. It creates constant friction, political paralysis, and just a ton of instability. And you can probably guess how that sectarian system feeds directly into this next pillar: widespread corruption. See, when power is all about group loyalty, then loyalty to the nation as a whole can take a back seat. This creates this massive system of patronage, giving jobs, money, and contracts to your own supporters. It's so deeply woven into the fabric of the government that many argue corruption isn't just a flaw in the system, it is the system. And that, obviously, just destroys public trust. Which leads us to what this all means for the average person living there. Weak state institutions. When a government is gridlocked by infighting and being drained by corruption, it can't do its most basic job. We're talking about things we take for granted, like keeping the lights on, making sure the water is clean, and providing security for its own citizens. This failure to deliver is why you see so much anger and so many protests. Okay, so let's pull all of these threads together. Let's step back and look at the big picture. What does it all look like when you see these pieces moving, or not moving, all at once? At the end of the day, Iraqocracy is a word for a state that is just buckling under this immense, crushing weight. It's the weight of its own internal divisions and these huge governance failures. It creates this vicious cycle where the sectarianism fuels the corruption weakens the state, and the weak state makes life harder for everyone, which just fuels more division, and around it goes. And that leaves us with one last and pretty heavy question to think about. When a state is being fractured and pulled apart by all of these pressures, the corruption, the divisions, the violence, what's the glue? What is actually holding it together, and for how long? It's a really sobering question, and it's one that goes way beyond just Iraq. It forces all of us to think about what democracy and a functioning state truly mean in the first place.